I always say sleep at night is like a battery that's recharging. So you need to use that battery in order to recharge it at night. So if you just stay on the couch, you sleep all day, or you don't move and you don't get light exposure, it might actually make it harder to sleep the next night.
We're back with Dr. Shelby Harris, a psychologist and sleep expert from New York. And today we're going to talk about how to handle the rest of your day if you had a particularly rough night.
Yeah.
Every once in a while I also have a bad night of sleep. I then tend to sleep in a little longer if I can, if I don't need to go to work. Is that the right way to go about it?
You know, I think if you're someone who once in a while has a bad night here and there, I'm not immune to them myself. If you can, sleeping an extra hour, hour and a half is not going to be a big problem. But if you're doing it to compensate routinely for bad nights, or you're going to bed earlier, that's stuff that actually can be problematic, yeah.
Because then
you
create a new habit.
You're creating new habits, but what you're doing is by sleeping in, or we call it sleep extension. So you're going to bed early or you're sleeping in later. What you're doing is you're actually stealing sleep from the next night. So when we say to really stay consistent with your bedtime and wake time, if you're having trouble routinely, 3 or more nights of bad sleep a week, really try to keep that wake time the same, because it makes you hungrier for sleep the next night, that you'll actually fall asleep a little bit faster and stay asleep more.
Yeah, so it's really also about not staying too long in bed, right?
Yeah, for sure. So it's really about getting up. The things that I love to do if you've had a bad night routinely, or even once in a while, get up at around the same time if you can. Like I said, if it's once in a while, an hour is not going to be a make or break. But really try to get up at about the same time. Light exposure is super, super important. Light is alerting, so make sure you're getting a lot of light during the day. One thing that I always do is the first thing I do is I get up, if I've had a bad night, and I have a big glass of water, ideally lemon water. Cold water is very alerting, and sleep deprivation when you've had a bad night is actually very dehydrating. So a good glass of water is helpful. And then about a half hour to an hour, ideally later, that's when I tend to have that cup of coffee for me, because caffeine is not the devil. It's okay to have a cup or two of coffee. If you need to have that second cup earlier in the day, before, say, about 2 or 3 p.m., if you say go to bed at about 10 or 11 at night, that's okay. So coffee, and then one other big thing in the morning is try to get a little bit of movement in. So if you had a hard workout planned, maybe you don't do that. You be kind to yourself and you kind of rest a little bit, but go for a walk. Do something. Go to the gym if you can, and just move your body, because movement will help as well.
So take it easy, but don't sort of slump on a chair.
Yes, take it easy, but I always say sleep at night is like a battery that's recharging. So you need to use that battery in order to recharge it at night. So if you just stay on the couch, you sleep all day, or you don't move and you don't get light exposure, it might actually make it harder to sleep the next night again.
Yeah, that might be the biggest problem then.
That happens a lot.
And you know, when I had small kids, I would be sleep deprived, of course, when they woke up in the middle of the night. And then I tended to do extra sleeping over the weekend.
Yeah. When you have little kids, it's par for the course. They wake up all night long. It's okay to sleep when you can, when you have little babies. If they start to get a lot bigger and they're still having trouble, then you might want to actually address what's going on with the kids, but sleep when you can. If it starts to become that when you actually can sleep at night, you have trouble sleeping, you have more insomnia and they're not waking you up, that's when you want to start doing that kind of limiting of your sleep, maybe not napping. Napping is great if you're sleep deprived, but if it starts to steal the sleep from night and you have nighttime troubles, that's when you want to stay away from it.
So nap time, would it be not a good idea to have a nap for everyone every day?
I think we call it power naps. Power naps are wonderful if you don't have trouble sleeping at night. So it's a great little, like a 20-minute refresher. So I usually tell people, go to bed, or go into your bed, ideally, if you can. In your office, make it dark. But go and take a 20-minute nap, set a timer for 30 minutes. Not longer than that, because then it actually gets harder to wake up from it. So a quick little nap is totally fine earlier in the day, before about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But that being said, if you are someone who finds that you can't fall asleep at night, or you're waking up routinely in the middle of the night, the nap might actually be stealing the sleep from from your nighttime. That's where the sleep journal might be great. So if you track any napping, you might see if it impacts your nighttime sleep at all.
During the day, and I think if you have slept badly at night and you're probably going to be sleepy throughout the day, is it a good idea to reach out for carbs or for caffeine, or is that basically a no-go?
A cup or two of coffee or any kind of caffeine is totally fine. Earlier in the day, no problem with that. Napping, like I said, but just be careful of what you're eating, because when you're not sleeping as well, we tend to reach for high fat, high sugar, carbs, food to give it that extra energy. It's not a big problem, but if you're having a lot of sugar in the evening, that can make it harder to sleep. And then if you've had a number of sleep-deprived nights and you're reaching for more of those carbs and the sugar and fat, it can lead to weight gain, which can then cause problems with snoring and sleep quality and all these other issues. So just try to be aware of it.
Yeah, I think if we can recap what you just told us, is that it's all about balance. You can take a nap, but just make sure you don't do it too long. You can take a coffee, just make sure you don't take too much or too close to your bedtime and all stuff like that.
Yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with any of these things, but that's where tracking it is helpful, because it's hard to say you're someone who's very sensitive to caffeine, you shouldn't be having more than 1 cup.
Yeah.
If you track it and you see how it influences your night, then you'll be able to figure out what works for you and what doesn't work for you.
One more question. I have a colleague who, if she doesn't sleep well for one night, she starts freaking out over how am I going to fall asleep the next night. How do you make sure that one night of bad sleep doesn't turn into sleep anxiety or something?
Yeah, sleep anxiety, right? The more you try to force it, the worse it actually gets. So the few things we want to try and do, if you notice that you have that pattern, try to get up at the same time. That's when the sleeping in can cause a problem. So make sure you get up at the same time, you get some movement, you don't nap, because that can make it harder at night. And to be aware of that forcing feeling that you have, and say to yourself, if I don't sleep tonight, I'll sleep tomorrow, and if not tomorrow, by the 3rd. Usually what we see happen is by the 3rd night, people have this natural mechanism to start catching up on their sleep, as long as you don't go to bed too early or sleep in too late. So the more you try to force it and get worried about it, guess what? You're actually making it worse. So you gotta try and let it go.
We're just gonna give in to it, right?
Sleep will happen when it happens.
Well, I think that's a really nice conclusion to this episode. Also, we're going to talk about another topic tomorrow when you're not actually in control.
Yeah.
Maybe you can tell a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, there's things like jet lag, shift work, having little babies at home. There are some things where you're just sleep deprived, and sometimes you just have to go with it for a little while, and it's just about adjusting to it as best you can.
We're going to talk all about it tomorrow. Great. Thanks.